Hey everybody, I'm Ryan. I work at PayPal. Basically, for the past 6 or 7 years, I've been an engineer, then a manager, then back into an engineer as a technical leader. Pretty laser focused on building high-performing engineering orgs for very large web apps in e-commerce and fintech. So that means you got to have really high performance. You have to be very personalized. You have to have really good accessibility because of the scale you're at. You just have so many customers, you can't ignore it. And then you also have to have high iteration velocity because you have such a competitive market. You have to be able to respond to anything and make quick changes. So almost a year ago to the day, we started rewriting checkout in App Router from the ground up, and I'm extremely excited to tell you how it went. Basically show you how we used it as a springboard to enable broader cultural change to ship faster, and then give you some lessons to take away for how you can do it at your own companies. So we work on branded checkout, which is basically like the classic PayPal. You hit the button, get the pop-up, and it's a ton of people use it. It makes $9 billion a year. It has 27% of the TPV, and we have hundreds of engineers working on it. The old architecture is basically 2018 era, kind of React stack. We have a server using Kraken, which is a heavily customized Express.js thing. And then that's feeding into 3 client applications that are all using all kinds of different things. It was designed so that people could ship independently. But over time, your product usually ends up outpacing your platform. And so you end up in these situations where you have extra UI libraries from experiments. You have customized tooling all over the place. And then when you're separated, you'll end up getting different stacks born out of that if you're not paying really close attention to it. And so that caused, you're making tons of money, so you're okay, you're the shipping product, it feels great. But over time, you end up in these situations where you kind of have to declare bankruptcy on your technical debt and rise from the ashes to get your new app out. So we kind of hit that point. It's a good problem to have, but it is what it is. If you're a big company, you know what this feels like. So the biggest problems we had were lack of type safety. Obviously, that's really bad, especially in 2018 era app. You're clicking through all these Redux files, oh man, what's the shape of the data? Where am I going? What's going on with the data fetching? We're doing a lot of code splitting all over the place. We're doing dynamic imports all over the place. We have we're calling React Server APIs, trying to do fancy stuff to get the app faster, doing graphical optimizations. Because there's 4 different apps, you're in this situation where just to get the state of the app, you have to be running multiple servers. And then if you have external NPM packages for your UI library, you have to download that thing, and then you have to have it all running at the same time and imported. And it can be really hard to kind of get work done that spans across multiple sections of the app and to do code sharing. And that compounds when you run into your infrastructure issues, because you get this situation where your builds are getting slower because you have so much stuff that you're stitching together. Your build times are so long. You're releasing 4 different apps. It takes a week or 2 to ship the app. And then you're in this situation where it's so hard to change stuff. You have big changes. You have a lot of changes in progress. It takes 2 engineers out for each app that you're building. It becomes really scary to make the changes because you have so much stuff built up because you can't merge every day, that you run into this situation where you're very scared of breaking something because you're in a fintech app. And then that just compounds over and over again. You end up having to do all this manual checks to make sure stuff's not breaking, and it's just not a really good situation to be in. So anyways, you go from this login service, and then it's separate, so you go through the web server to the client apps, and we were able to consolidate all of that into one app with a shared set of dependencies. So there's no redundancies in styling or testing or anything like that. And then we have a separate UI library inside the monorepo. We had to keep the routing service so that you could do an incremental migration. So this is kind of remedial, but I'm going over all the kind of developer health benefits of Next.js and how it helps you with this stuff. So the first thing is you don't have to code split by hand. You get the file-based routing, which is really nice. And then because of that, you also get this kind of ownership thing where when somebody's onboarding to the code base, it's very easy to grok. So like somebody can just come into the code base, they never worked on it before, and they're like, oh, cool, this is my thing, this is my thing. And then they still have the shared code. And then with App Router, you have co-location, so you have components and the page together. So like it optimizes for like maximum deletability and things like that. But you have to be careful with this because like as your app gets really, really big, you end up with the slower build sizes, slower build times, and you might have to like actually like move some of that out. So it's kind of the sliding scale where you'd want to like split it off into a turbo repo or something like that so that you can keep it fast. With React Server components, you get a lot of benefits over the old setup with Next, where instead of having like the separate Git server-side props or whatever, everything's like in React land and it's composable. So like you can go throughout the tree and kind of stick these things in places, and you're not having to think about all those optimizations. Ideally, you're not shipping any code to the browser. And then you have TRPC on top of that for us, using it as our data access layer, which is really, really nice. It provides really nice like click-through kind of front to back intelligence. You can jump through things, and it's great. TRPC was kind of an interesting like hedge against server actions at the time when like we weren't super sure about everything being stable, but it's worked out really well that you can just keep TRPC on the back end and have the procedures and have like one place to do all the sketchy stuff you're doing for the data stuff. We're using Shatsian for the component library, which has been really wonderful. You have that like locality of behavior from Tailwind where you've like compressed everything together, and you get pretty good accessibility out of the box so that you don't have to be writing like keyboard controls. That's really one of the biggest things like you shouldn't be doing yourself. If you're ever writing keyboard commands, it's probably a sign that like you probably should have used the component library. Obviously, like we have really good animation polish out of this as well. And then with Storybook in particular, it's really nice to have the play functions because mainly we want to write end-to-end tests and test backwards from the user experience. But for the component tests, it's nice to have like the behavior, the component documentation, and the test all together, and it's running in the real DOM, so you're not having to mess with like mocking browser APIs or anything like that. We built out kind of a shameless ripoff of the Vercel feature flag SDK because of some custom requirements that we had in order to enable us to do like trunk-based development where we're feature flag driven. So like you can ship code work in progress, hide it behind the flag, and then turn it on when you're ready to. But because it's running on the server, the customer's not paying the cost for you shipping any of that code, which is really nice. And then later on, you can get a lot fancier. You can plug it into like experimentation frameworks, A/B test feature flag frameworks. And for us, we're gonna end up doing a lot of robust personalization with AI where we can like statically pre-compute stuff based on this and like ship it to the user. It'll be pretty cool. So just by doing this lift and shift, by going to App Router, we made the app around 6 times faster for slow internet connections. That's no optimizations. We're still doing like server waterfalls. We have like a lot of issues that we still need to pay off for the tech debt, and we still have a custom server, and you're getting all of this. We're not really doing anything crazy. And then for OTP, you're getting around 3 times faster for like a medium slow internet connection. So that's pretty crazy. So the developer feedback loop is pretty much really tight just from us doing that. Our infrastructure is still having issues though, and we're still releasing way too slow. But if you like take stock of everything we've learned, we have a ton of engineers that are now collaborating, code sharing. They're not writing duplicate stuff. Like all those paper cuts are now gone. And then when you multiply that by like 90 plus engineers, you have this windfall of productivity that you can then step back and say, cool, like how do I make like a benefit of this? And so I think the big takeaway from this is that a lot of these big companies that have like maybe accrued tech debt over time and they want to get to a more performant app, but they also need their platform to catch up with them, can basically take all their top heavy, like senior like engineering talent and just like scale that across their company. So like you can go to your DevOps team, build up better platform capabilities. We had people going and making our internationalization libraries like compatible with the like more server-friendly UI models. We were able to do a lot of things all over the place, mostly related to CI/CD. But it's really like any place in your company where you need technical leadership to scale out to keep the iteration loop tight. You can just go do that because of how much productivity you freed up. And then like more junior developers are able to ship vertically, which is really nice. And they can kind of pick up a lot of the slack there. So by doing all that and scaling across the company, we're now shipping every day. We're able to use Turbo Repo to keep the build times really fast, locally and in CI/CD. And we've always been doing comprehensive end-to-end testing, but now we're able to gate it on every build because of how fast we're able to get everything and parallelize it and like keep compounding the gains and reinvesting into that. We're not where we want to be yet. We want to like asymptotically trend towards like 0 time to ship to the customer and get the feedback and all that stuff. But we're on track to do that. And we're on custom server now, so we can't use stuff like for self previews or anything like that. But we're slowly whittling away that to try to like get to a situation like that. We're also really excited about eval-driven development, AI-driven testing, where maybe we can have like an agent who will then just do like basically UX or accessibility audit and like blast through the app with a keyboard and try to find issues for us ahead of time. Anybody who's like talked to me or seen me before knows I grew up in a disabled family. My partner is a high achieving blind person. So my whole life I've kind of grown up around people using assistive tech and kind of seeing how people use the computer in that way. And so what that means is like it's a lot easier for you to just see issues before you get into the audit phase where you're like reflecting on it. And so one of the things we're trying to do is like scale that out to everybody, because part of the iterative loop is like you really need to understand your customer, and accessibility is a big part of that when you're at scale. So we have a program called Accessibility Champions. It's like an immersive program where you basically learn how disabled people use the computer. You learn about their life, and you basically, it's like deep empathy training. But then on top of that, you'll learn how to do an accessibility audit, and you'll learn how to do keyboard testing. And so basically a lot of these people who take this can just go like probably run their own firm, but we made it a requirement just to contribute to our repo. And so we have over 90 people who are like fully trained up on this stuff. And so before they even write a test, they're thinking like, okay, how can this experience be good? How can it, make sure they're not messing stuff up? And then thinking further toward like, how do I make an excellent experience for somebody who might be using assistive tech? Doing a shout out to Kent, because the ability to like work backwards from the customer experience is really essential to nailing accessibility in a way that gives you a good feedback loop. And I think a lot of this stuff is kind of like a logical extension to doing that with excellence at scale. So basically where we're at now is like we're almost 3 times faster. So we just hit over 5,000 merged PRs in like 11 months. The old app was like 6 years old, and I think it's at like 12,000. So just to give you an idea of like how fast we're turning this stuff out, and we're doing it at higher quality, we have way better insight on like how accessible we are and how how close what we're building is to what we intended to build for the customer. And then with the release speedups, we're shipping 1 app instead of 4. So we're 5 times faster, and we're shipping daily. One of the big takeaways of this is the tools you pick don't matter that much at 10 or 20 people compared to when you have hundreds of people. And you really need to optimize for collaboration. The collaboration, it creates serendipity, but it also prevents rework. And you're going to have a ton of problems as the years go on over time if you didn't promote collaboration, because you'll end up with fragmentation. So things like type safety, monorepos, you really want to lean into that stuff until you absolutely can't. So like micro front end, stuff like that, it sounds good, but it's almost always a premature optimization in my experience for the people that have done it, because they should have probably like reinvested in a platform, collaboration, and bringing people together. If you've never shipped that fast before, like if you've never worked at a startup, or you've never like shipped anything on Vercel and felt like how good the feedback loop can be when you like commit, get a URL and like you can just start playing with it, get it in the customer's hands quickly, you need to cultivate that taste so you can have a good vision for what your engineering teams can accomplish and work backward from that. It applies to accessibility too, really anything, but UI engineers usually have a good feel for like what feels good to use. They don't always have a good feel for like if they're shipping as fast as they could be. And so I think it's really important to chase after things like that, because I think vision is something that anybody could use. If you watch the conference talks from people like Guillermo and Malta, you can see that even like going 10 years back, they've been laser focused on building for like the most performance sensitive apps on the planet, where the money really matters, and with the highest number of people, and where you scale from like the level of how dynamic the app is can vary a lot, and then the really highly dynamic ones. So like you can't ship PayPal checkout on like Rails and Hetzner, right? Like you really need to be using something that can enable you to have like a highly dynamic experience. And so I think Next is probably a really good place to be for anybody who has those very specific requirements. Lastly, one of the big things for iteration velocity is like basically just doing stuff that nobody asked you to do. Don't look at your org chart. Don't look at the Jira tickets. Just like do cool stuff when nobody's looking, and that will inspire people around you to keep shipping further and greater. And it's one of the best things you can do. And lastly, we're kind of in this renaissance for front-end tooling and education and everything like that. And there's kind of like this wave of optimism, but also like the new wave of developers coming up where they're like on the T3 stack and stuff like that. They're able to ship so much more vertically and comprehensively than we've ever been able to do before. And so I think like anybody who has reports, they see people coming up, like you should kind of like share that optimism and like empower people to like do really cool stuff, because I think the ability for us to do that has never been greater, especially on these stacks. So that's all I got. If you're real passionate about shipping on these types of things, PayPal could use you. You'll be very high impact, and we could probably have you shipping within like a day. So yeah, thanks. Any questions? What's up?
So you talked about the PayPal Accessibility Champions. Have y'all open sourced that training at all?
No, it's internal for now. We didn't have a ton of engineers doing it. It's been around for a few years, so that is something that could be really cool. Yeah, we'd definitely be into that.
And just one more like quick question. What do y'all use for your monorepo? And do you like it? Like, what are pros, cons?
So before we had Lerna, and now we've moved to Turbo Repo. It's on NPM Workspaces for now.
Hi, you talked about moving from this fragmented repo to Next.js, and I was curious about some of the process involved in rewriting tests, and your big engineering team, like who took accountability for stuff like that, and what that process looked like. Just given how the component structure changed and things were placed differently.
Yeah, so like working backwards from the user experience usually involves like kind of like checking, let me see the button that says like checkout or something like that. If you can write tests at that level of abstraction, you can change out a lot of stuff and make sure that it's still working right. So I think that's generally been the most scalable way of doing it. Yeah.
Hi, on the CI/CD accessibility test, what do you recommend would be like the top test to do as far as accessibility goes?
It's kind of tough. So like automatic tests only cover 30% of WCAG rules. So do that as a baseline just to make sure you're catching that stuff. A lot of it is just like, you have to do keyboard stuff like while you're in the process of development to catch focus traps, make sure you can get through the app, things like that. I would say do that in the course of development for the feedback loop. But besides that, it's kind of hard to capture the user experience right now. It's a lot of like just making sure when you're writing end-to-end tests the things you are testing are tested in a way that mirrors like how the accessibility tree is structured, and you're not using test IDs and things like that. So it's nothing crazy, but yeah.
So I had a question. While moving to Next.js app routing, did you need to make any workaround to make that work for PayPal, or all the features which were provided by Next was sufficient enough to do the complete migration?
Everything's pretty much been good. We've had to make a couple PRs, but we're on bare metal. We're hosted like on our own data centers. So we haven't really had to do anything special to run everything.
And where is the app deployed? Is it on Vercel or is it on PayPal's own pipeline?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
So where is the Next-based app deployed? Is it on Vercel or is it on?
It's on our own data centers.
Okay.
Bye, all.